Today's guest is Victoria Moran, a Main Street vegan for over 37 years. She was named one of PETA's sexiest vegans over 50. She's an American author and speaker. She's written a number of books specializing in both spirituality and veganism, and she's combined the two very, very nicely. She hosts Main Street Vegan radio show and podcast on Unity Online Radio. She started her career as a freelance magazine writer and has gone on to publish a number of best-selling vegan books starting in 1985 with Compassion, the Ultimate Ethic. Today, you're in for a great treat as you listen to Victoria share what it took for her to become vegan, what it was like nearly 40 years ago as a vegan, and what she's doing today. So welcome, Victoria Moran.
Welcome to the Vegan Visibility Podcast Show, where your host, Kathleen Gage, shines the spotlight on vegan and plant-based businesses and entrepreneurs from all walks of life committed to cruelty-free eating, healthy lifestyles, animal compassion, and the environment. Enjoy the show.
Well, Victoria, I have to tell you, I have been a fan for years, and you're one of the reasons that I went from identifying as a plant-based eater to being a vegan. You have been around the playground, if you will, for close to 40 years. You're one of the original vegans. When people think of veganism, they think of you. And I'm thrilled to have you on the show because I know that my community is really vegan curious. Many of them are vegans and they just want to go deeper into it. And you come from a very spiritual perspective in all this. But let's start with you giving a little bit about your background. For those people, I can't believe who wouldn't know who you are, because if you've been around the vegan community for any length of time, you know who you are. So let's start with that.
Oh, you're very kind. Thank you so much for having me on. Well, I grew up in Kansas City, Missouri in the 1950s and 60s, not exactly a veg-friendly place at that time, but I do remember coming home from school with the 4 food groups in first grade, and my nanny, an older woman who spoke her mind, said, well, there's some people who never eat any meat and they're called vegetarians. And I could take you to a restaurant and get you a hamburger made out of peanuts and you'd think you were having beef. So from that instant, I just knew there was something there for me, but I didn't know what. I'd certainly never met any vegetarians. But at 17, I discovered yoga, and the 3 books available on the subject at the time all said, if you want to get serious, you need to stop eating animals. Now, that was not terribly difficult, but when I heard about veganism about 5 years later, no dairy products or eggs in addition to meat, fish, and fowl, it made sense on an ethical level, but it just seemed absolutely impossible. First, I was a practicing binge eater and periodic dieter. And in both of those states, it was very hard to do without animal products at that time. And it was just very odd then. We're talking the early 1970s, when you couldn't just walk into a store or a coffee shop and get non-dairy milk or something of that nature. So it took me a while, but the coolest thing was that a couple of people believed in me, and they were Jay and Freya Dinshaw of the American Vegan Society, still going strong. They just opened a wonderful vegan information center in the historic district of Philadelphia, which is pretty cool. But they just treated me like I was a vegan, even when I fell off the wagon. And because they believed in me, eventually I could too. And in 1983, I had an infant daughter, and I had gotten very serious about a 12-step program for people with eating disorders. And with the combination of those two things, I knew that I could do this. And a day at a time, I have been doing it for over 37 years, and just so grateful. I am so grateful that I found it when I did. You know, everybody says, oh, I wish I'd found it sooner. I think we all wish that, but thank goodness it's come into our lives, you know, for our own health, as well as for knowing that we're on the right side of history.
Absolutely. And I love that about being on the right side of history. And, you know, as we think of the people that we will transcend and go on to whatever comes next, what side of history were we on? What were the decisions we made? Now, when you said 1983 as the year that you started a 12-step program around eating, I was surprised to find out at one point you were actually obese. I was actually shocked to find that out, because it's such a part of your spirit of being a healthy vegan. And 1983 is the year that I had my last drink. I've been sober for nearly 38 years. Yeah. And so I'm very familiar.
Cool.
Yeah, I'm extremely familiar with 12-step programs. And that really was the start of my spiritual foundation. But I'm curious, you had talked about, well, first of all, you have Main Street Vegan. You've got the Main Street Vegan Academy. Tell us about that. And then I'd love to talk about the Compassion Consortium that you are involved with.
Sure. Main Street Vegan Academy trains vegan lifestyle coaches and educators. We have been doing that since 2012. So we have some 550 graduates on 6 continents, which is pretty cool. And what we really do is train people to be the experts on the vegan lifestyle. So we have vegan principles, the nutrition, the health, animal rights and animal law, the environment, veganism and fashion, history of the movement. Vegetarianism has been woven throughout human history, and to really be an expert on this topic, we need to know that. And then they get their communication principles. So they have all this information. Well, how do we deliver this online and in public speaking, and in working with people with food issues, and working with mixed and transitional families? And then we have business principles for people who want to really get out there, start a coaching practice, start a business. And we have so many wonderful entrepreneurs who have come through the program. One woman has an ice cream company in Mexico City, cowboy boots in Dallas, a convenience store in Philadelphia, a vegan cheese shop on the Lower East Side of Manhattan. So we've really got people out there doing amazing things. And the other thing I'm so proud of, well, there are 2 things I'm very proud of. One is our faculty, and that is that we have some of the best and the brightest in the entire vegan space. Chef Fran Costigan, Dr. Robert Ostfeld, Martin Rowe of Brighter Green, animal rights attorney Marianne Sullivan, and fashion designer Joshua Catcher. And they come and give us their best and give us their all. And then we stay connected. I mean, not if people don't want to stay connected, if they just want to take the course and go on about their business, that's fine too. But we do have a private Facebook group. We have lots of after the fact ways to gather and get help and get networking and just guidance going forward, because we all really want this lifestyle to be out there in the world. And one of the things that is so cool about the Academy is we have plant-based people, and we have environmental people, and we have animal people, and we're all on the same page. Nobody leaves there feeling like, well, I was in this camp. Because the camps disappear. We're all just trying to make the world better.
Well, I am curious. When the pandemic hit, there was a lot of shutdowns, and myself, I was a keynote speaker. I haven't been on the platform, the physical platform, for going on 2 years now, and I used to do that quite frequently. That was a big part of my revenue stream. But I've been in digital marketing for years. How has the pandemic and the change of how we do business, how has that shifted the way that you deliver content to your graduates?
Well, we were completely in person. People came to New York City. We did field trips. All the instructors were in person. Everything was very much hands-on and very concentrated. So it was 6 days, all run together, and up early and out late. And so in that way, there was a kind of energy that I just didn't think could be duplicated, certainly not in a standard online course where it's all packaged and you play things that were made Lord knows when. Now, Zoom is such an interesting midway place, and I have been absolutely dumbfounded at how brilliantly the magic has been able to translate over this live online platform. And that really came home to me about a month ago when one of my graduates sent me a picture that one of the other graduates, and they both met in the Zoom class, the one from Chicago had driven to Louisville to meet her classmate. So this is telling me that, you know, in person is wonderful. It's going to be so fabulous when we can once again breathe the same air. But for now, this is splendid. And it's, of course, opened things up. So we've had people, I mean, people have come for the in-person course from far away, but it's very difficult for a lot of people. So we have someone now from Hong Kong. We've had someone from Finland, a lot of people from Europe, who it's just easier for them to do it online. So, you know, we make do. And this is one of the things I've been so proud of my vegan colleagues since the pandemic. You know, I think we were all a little bit shell-shocked at the beginning, and then we just got up and started doing things differently. I don't feel that this movement has lost a beat. We just shifted, and now we're doing it another way, and it still works.
Well, in a sense, I think that it's opened up more opportunity because people now do more research online, and veganism has really exploded as far as the awareness in the last year and a half to 2 years, which is really exciting.
Yes.
You know, myself, I started my podcast just under 2 years ago, the first one, and then I rebranded my second one, which is Vegan Visibility, which I want to remind people that's what you're listening to right now. But tell us about the Compassion Consortium.
Yes. Oh, thank you. Well, it's a sweet, sweet story because the actual idea for that was my husband's. And so often people say, oh, you know, I'd be vegan, but I'm single. How can you date if you're vegan? And so for a long time, I would only date spiritual vegetarians. And then when I met William, I had been widowed for some time. I was widowed young, and we met, and he ate meat. And I thought, you know what difference does it make? It's not like you're going to get married. Well, bless his heart, within 2 weeks, he had stopped eating meat. Now, the vegan thing was just a bridge too far. That wasn't going to happen. But at least, you know, he was vegetarian and we were making that work. And then ultimately he did become vegan. And just his heart really opened. So when I met him, he was very much in, you know, the outer world and the world of business and that. He never really thought about anything spiritual. He hadn't really needed to. But in 2019, he said, I want to go back to school and I want to study theology. I just about fell over. Anyway, he went to the One Spirit Interfaith Seminary for their 2-year program. And rather miraculously, his dean at the seminary was vegan. So they kind of put their heads together a little bit and came up with this beautiful idea for a spiritual center that is for vegans and vegetarians and the veg curious and people who love animals, because very often in spiritual and religious centers, that's just ignored and sometimes even defied. I remember a church that I went to years ago that I thought was always treated me respectfully for my beliefs. And then somebody donated a mink coat to auction off to benefit the church. And I just felt like I had awakened in a parallel universe. And these things happen. You know, we had a lovely woman come to one of our services who said that she'd been Baptist all her life, but she just couldn't go back to her church after they had the pig roast. And so there's so many people out there who either are lacking that spiritual connection and want it, or they're very much involved in the spiritual tradition of their heritage or their choosing, but they would like something else. So we say, we'll be your spiritual home or second home. And so we meet again via Zoom on the fourth Sunday of every month. And It's a beautiful interfaith service with music and meditation and stories. In lieu of a sermon, I interview our person, our special guest, and we try to get amazing people. We've had amazing people from different kinds of backgrounds. So we're also on YouTube if anybody wants to see what we've done in the past. And then we also have a book and film club in between, in the middle of the month. There's so many amazing books and films that have to do with veganism and the thoughtful side of veganism, I think, is kind of where we focus. So it just makes so much possible for people. We're compassionconsortium.org if anybody wants to check us out.
And I'm glad you said that, because I was going to ask you, Victoria, how do people get in touch with you, or how do they find the services? So let's start with me reminding people that you're listening to Vegan Visibility Podcast Show. And I'm talking with Victoria Moran, who is one of the biggest influencers within the movement. And you've been doing this for many, many years, before it was kind of the trendy thing to do, because I think some people now do it because it seems trendy, but then really if they immerse themselves into the lifestyle, they realize this is not a trend. This is truly a way of living. This is a philosophy. This is a lifestyle. And how can people reach you as far as a website, and then also the services?
Sure. So for the consortium, it's compassionconsortium.org, or some people say consortium. That's how it's spelled. It all works. And then for Main Street Vegan Academy as mainstreetvegan.net. And you can also find out there about the Main Street Vegan podcast, about the film, A Prayer for Compassion, Thomas Jackson's film that I was lead producer on a couple of years ago, and a weekly blog and all kinds of good stuff.
Wonderful. Well, tell us about the Prayer for Compassion film.
Oh, sure. Well, again, kind of in keeping with the Compassion Consortium, the film is about the spirituality of our food choices. And it's a beautiful story of the filmmaker having his own awakening. And as part of becoming a more spiritual person, it just occurred to him he couldn't eat animals. And so he was the only vegan that he knew. He was active in a church, which he found out later was actually founded by vegetarians, but that history had gotten a little bit buried. And so he took off across the country and then ultimately across oceans to look at how animals, religions, and food intersect. It's a beautiful, beautiful film. And I think he found somebody from just about every religious tradition on earth. And it's so interesting to hear people from different cultures, different parts of the world saying the same thing about the essential nature of kindness, that if the divine, by whatever word somebody wants to call that, is indeed love, then how can we be more spiritual than when we're practicing love to other beings, to the gift that's this body and this earth? It's a great movie. I highly recommend it, with or without the popcorn.
Excellent. Well, we'll put air pop popcorn. That's good. We'll put the links down below in the show notes. But I'm curious on the whole topic of spirituality and more unity between people, regardless of what their background is or their beliefs are. I think that right now we're in a big divide. There is an effort to divide people regardless of what they believe in. And how do we raise awareness around veganism? How do we raise awareness around bringing people together so that they fully understand that we are connected with the animals, we are connected with the oceans, the mountains, and all of that? You know, it's like I've been on my spiritual quest since I was in my 20s, and I'm in my late 60s now. And it's like, it's been a lifelong journey. And I fell off a few places along the way. But as I mentioned, the really solid foundation I got was through the 12 steps. And that led me into many other areas. But really, the most spiritual thing I believe I've ever done is make the choice to consciously release the need for any animal or dairy products and connect with the animals on a different level. So what is your recommendation, if you will, for people who are vegan curious and they really want to understand more about the, if you will, the ethical and spiritual side of the lifestyle?
Sure. Well, first you want to get to know the people who are affected. And when I say the people, I mean the animals. But I'm very excited today because the Non-Human Rights Project just announced this incredible thing that's happened in the courts here in New York City. It was finally determined by some legal body that an elephant in the Bronx Zoo was not a thing. Now, they didn't go as far as to say that he or she is a person, but you kind of have two choices there. So to get to know the animals that most people eat, and a great way to do this is to visit a farmed animal sanctuary. They're in virtually every state. They're all open for visitors, and to go there, and if you have children, go with your kids, because the kids will already get it. They got it when they showed up here, and then they're educated out of this real love and respect for all beings. But when you go to a place where you can actually see these creatures as individuals, everything changes. The idea that somebody that you just hung out with could end up on a plate, it really shifts everything. So that would be the first thing. Just go. And the other thing is to understand that beautiful principles are sometimes promulgated by imperfect people. In fact, always, because we're all imperfect. So if you happen to have run into a vegan who was annoying or critical or demeaning or in some other way not behaving as we would all hope that we would like to behave, if you can just kind of let that go and look to the principles. So I would really also suggest reading and films. If you like to read, there's a beautiful book called Eating Animals by Jonathan Safran Foer, who is a novelist. And so the book reads like a novel. And you really get a sense. In his case, he was looking to see, did they want to raise their child vegetarian or vegan or meat eater? And so he went out to look at all of these different farms. Beautiful, beautiful read. And then I'll plug my own book, Main Street Vegan, which is a lovely intro. It's getting a little long in the teeth now. It's 9 years old, but it still has wonderful, wonderful information written in a very friendly way. And I think that's so important, because nobody wants to do something with a bunch of people who aren't friendly.
Right.
And then
you
also
wrote that with your daughter, didn't you?
I did. Yeah.
Yes,
My daughter has been vegan since weaning. I was lacto-ovo vegetarian when I was pregnant and early in nursing. But when I looked down at her and in her crib and thought, you know what, you have to raise this child vegan, and that means you have to be vegan. So the rest is history. She is a professional stunt woman and aerialist, so very strong.
That's
and then I just wanted to mention some movies too, some documentaries that just, most people have heard of most of them, like What the Health and Cowspiracy and The Game Changers. But a really great way to make the decision whether or not you want to change your diet is to just set aside a weekend, hole up with some food, any kind of food, the kind of food you eat now, the kind of food you think you're going to eat next week, it doesn't matter, and just watch vegan videos and plant-based videos back to back and see where you find yourself on Monday.
I have to tell you, that's actually what I did. And when I first started, I started because I had inflammation. I was 64 at the time. And it was like, okay, I'm feeling what I heard I was supposed to feel as I got older. And so I started doing some research, came across Eat to Live and, the usual. And then I found myself going deeper and deeper into the documentaries and the films. And for hours on end, I was just immersed and just mesmerized with the information, shocked. I cried, I got angry. And then I came to the place of making the decision, I can never consume animal or dairy again. I just can't do it. But I wouldn't call myself vegan initially. It took a little while, and I was in the grocery store walking by the meat department, and I literally stopped in my tracks. I started crying in the grocery store, and I felt the pain and suffering. And I was right near the meat department, and it was like, how could I have been so blind? But it takes what it takes. It's like we get to the place when we get to the place, and then once we're there, it's interesting. The other day, somebody tried to build rapport with me by saying, well, I tried being vegan for a couple of years, but I couldn't give up cheese. And I said, there's a difference between being vegan and living the life and knowing that you've crossed that invisible line to being a plant-based eater. You've written, what, 13 books?
Yes.
14 books? Tell us about some of the books you've written and how it is that this information just seems to download from you and pour out of you. And you've been such an influence on people's decisions to become vegan.
Oh, you're so kind. Well, I wish it were that easy. I'm working on number 14 now on the book proposal, and the proposal for a nonfiction book, you write a proposal and then get a publisher and then write the book. And writing the book is so much easier than writing the proposal. As somebody said, the book costs $20. You hope the publisher will pay you $20,000, or more. And so that's how much better it has to be. So I'm kind of feeling under the gun on that, but I'm going to announce it anyway, because once the more people know about something, the more real it becomes. That one will be called Age Like a Yogi: A Heavenly Path to a Dazzling Third Act. So, well, Main Street Vegan in the vegan genre, that's really the one that I'm known for. I actually wrote the first book about veganism ever to come from a publishing house. There were some books and booklets from the Vegan Society in the UK and the American Vegan Society here, but I was getting a degree in comparative religions and earned a fellowship to do any kind of research outside North America. So I went to the UK to study vegans, because at that time there were so many more of them there, because veganism developed there in the 1940s. So I did that. And then the paper for that research became my very first book, Compassion, the Ultimate Ethic. And it did go out of print with the publisher. The American Vegan Society sells it now. And it's kind of funny. It's sort of like people are reading this paper that I wrote back in school. But so I kind of go back with the vegan books. And then my biggest book of all time isn't about veganism. It's about living magically, and it's called Creating a Charmed Life. So I really recommend that when people write to me, even now, and they'll say things like, I like all your books, but that Creating a Charmed Life, that's a blessed book.
Excellent. Well, we're going to put the link to your Amazon page in the show notes. I want to make sure that people have access to all your information.
Thank you.
And I want to remind people that this is Kathleen Gage. You've been listening to Vegan Visibility Podcast. I've been talking with Victoria Moran, and Victoria has definitely been a leader for quite some time. She's with Main Street Vegan. That is her company, and she does Main Street Vegan Academy. So be sure to check that out. And in closing, Victoria, what are your final thoughts for people?
Just enjoy this and just lean into it. That's a beautiful phrase from Kathy Freston. Don't want to steal anybody's phrase, but it's the idea. This isn't like becoming a convert. It isn't depriving yourself of anything. It isn't becoming somebody that you aren't. It's becoming truly who you are. And if I can just have 1 second to tell a little bitty story.
It's all yours.
Okay. Dr. Dean Ornish, we know way back in the late 1980s, determined that there was a way to not just prevent, but actually reverse coronary disease through a low-fat, virtually vegan diet, mild exercise, group support, yoga, and meditation. So when he's brought these findings out, it made such a big splash in the medical world, and Random House came to him to write his book, which then became a giant New York Times bestseller called Dr. Dean Ornish's Program for Reversing Heart Disease. But Dr. Dean Ornish, had wanted to call that book Opening Your Heart, because that's really what this does. Physiologically, yes, but psychologically and spiritually too. So allow it to happen, take it a day at a time, and you'll just be pleased as punch that you made that switch.
Well, Victoria, this is just amazing. Thank you so much for your time, because I know you're very, very busy, and I know you have a lot of people who want to really get your insights and hear your story and hear what it is that you have to say about the lifestyle. So thank you so much. And to everybody out there, please take Victoria's words to heart. Learn what it is to be a vegan. Learn about the animals, about compassion, and about being connected to the sentient beings. This is Kathleen Gage, wishing you a blessed day.
You've been listening to the Vegan Visibility Podcast Show. Be sure to subscribe to get notified when the next episode is live. And we always appreciate reviews. Join us next time for more inspiration, education, and motivation to build your business one cruelty-free and healthy person at a time.